Chapter 1. Welcome to Kochi. It was 2006. I had just moved to Kochi from Bangalore. It was my first day at my new school in Kochi, and I had to perform my first duty as a class teacher. All the students had gathered in the assembly hall, accompanied by their parents. I had to collect the children in my class by calling out their names over the mic. A simple enough task, except that nobody had taken into account my unfamiliarity with the mind boggling tongue twisters that local names in Kerala can be. The expression on the faces of the parents was definitely a series of Kodak moments, changing from mild surprise to shocked disbelief. As I sweated past Kochosar, Chittilapalli, Givargis, Tamarapalli, and clawed my way through Kottankulam, Vachaparambil, Chettiparambil after crawling painfully over Padinirkarathil and Kulathavalli. There was a collective exhalation of relief when I finished, and the next teacher almost received a standing ovation merely for reciting student names correctly. I fared no better with local addresses. Eripunna, Thiruvaniyur, Kochangani. Best stops, Kathirikadava, Valangambalam. Festivals, Karkidagavava, Achamaya. Flowers, Tumbapova, Kanikunna. In Malayalam, nothing was pronounced as it was transliterated in English, mainly because the gargling sounds required to speak the language had no phonetic equivalent in the English alphabet. So I grappled the z's, which were pronounced as guttural, rolling ers which sounded like ears, and required flinging of the tongue deep into the throat, and nerves that sounded like nothing on this earth. The difficulty of the language was directly proportional to my poor language ability. In effect, it was almost a year before I picked up even the rudiments of Malayalam. In hindsight, there was plenty to laugh about if my sense of humor had been in place. If I had not been so desperately unhappy. There were, of course, reasons. The first few months after moving to Kochi, I was miserable because the weather was hot and sticky. Then I wept because it was bleak and wet. The summer of my discontent melted into the monsoon of my discontent, and my unhappiness simply bubbled over unabated from one season to another. My husband was happy with the move. He liked his new job and was closer to his parents, who lived in Kochi. My kids loved the school, loved the new school, and the new apartment. It seemed to me that I was the only one who had incurred a loss. Misery hates loneliness. So I wept some more. For the decade worth of love, friendship, and support I had left behind in Bangalore, and for the comfort of familiar language and routine. Kochi was a town that was held together very strongly by the local culture and language, and it was easy for a non Keralite like me to become the perpetual outsider. It was one of the few places in India where Bollywood had not left its mark. There was only one theatre in town that played Hindi and English movies, and these ran barely a week to half empty houses. Not knowing Malayalam, I had to depend on my husband for even little transactions with the local populace. He had to step in as an interpreter and translator in my daily dealings with the maid, the electrician, the plumber, the courier, the building security, and what have you. I felt robbed of the little freedoms I had always taken for granted, and it was a confidence shattering experience. On a daily basis, I was embroiled in a language related situation that left me seething in fury. At every given opportunity, I called my friends in Bangalore and snivelled pathetically over the phone. I steadily hated the town till I could barely stand to live in it. As a teacher, my classroom time with the students was as delightful as ever. But in the staff room, I messed it up rather badly. Since it was an English medium school, English was the language of classrooms and official transactions. But true to local form, every teacher slipped into the local lingo the moment she slipped out of her professional avatar. Shrinking back into the onesie mode was hardly the answer, but that is exactly what I did. So while the staff room reverberated with laughter and easy talk, I was never part of any of the hilarity. I either sat around quietly with a wax smile plastered to my face or moved into my corner and got on with notebook correction. Of course, there was always a third option which I often fantasized about. Getting up and cutting through the babble with a shout of "What the fuck?" But thankfully, even in the blackest of moods, I knew that Rambo approach was not the best option. The truth was that I had allowed language to become a barrier between me and any potential friends. But that was not how I saw it then because I was too busy wallowing in my isolation. And so it went, sobbing and mourning my way through 6 months. Half the year had gone by, and my life did not seem to be getting any better. And then, one dark, wet September evening, on the way to the library, I saw a notice plastered on the wall. It was a very basic and rather shabby notice seeking volunteers for teaching. Close scrutiny revealed the name of the organization. Man. Closer scrutiny revealed that this was an acronym for Make a Difference. By now, my nose was nearly touching the wall, and so I decided to seek further details over the phone number provided. It was a rather vague resolve, and I did not really pursue it for over a week. But strangely enough, even after a week, the phone number I had merely glanced at was firmly embedded in my memory. At the best of times, I am a firm believer in science, and this was one I could not ignore. A soft young voice introduced himself as Sabari, the human resources representative of MAT. He answered my queries about the organization and its goals. Their modus operandi, he explained, was to enhance the quality of education children receive at shelter homes, mainly through English teaching. Fine words and designations. It all seemed very well organized and above board. In reality, the organization did not even have a shoestring, let alone a budget. All they did have was delusions of grandeur. But of course, I learned this much later. When he heard that I was a teacher, Shabari perked up considerably and asked me to come to the center where he worked on weekends. This was a shelter home for boys called Sneha Children's Home, about 15 minutes away from the house. But the same day, in fact, within the hour, I received another call from Matt. This was from a guy called Jidin, who introduced himself as the president of MAT. I wondered what I had done to merit this kind of attention, but I did not have to wonder long. I was asked two questions: if I knew any rich parents and if I could get them to part with their money. Nice. Here I was offering my invaluable teaching talent, and there he was, looking at me merely as a conduit to lay his hands on some money. But his honesty was refreshing, and his naivety was rather touching. So I fobbed him off with some vague assurances and thought no more of it. But Jidin was not on one to be so easily dismissed. When I reached Sneha Children's Home that weekend, there he was, a book in hand, encircled by a group of kids. When he stood up to meet me, I realized that he was a giant. At 6 feet and 4 inches, he towered over me, and it was an unusual experience for me. With an above average height, I was generally the one who did all the towering. So, there he was, a tall, skinny young man in jeans and a bright orange kurta, little boy slung across his shoulder. His black rimmed glasses failed miserably in lending any seriousness to a face that had a wicked smile and audacity written all over it. While he smiled and chatted for a while about Matt, he seemed oblivious to the little boy gamely climbing all over him and tugging at his hair and clothing. And then, as expected, the talk meandered back to obtaining funding for Matt. Jitin was very hopeful of getting funds for Matt. If I could spread the word about the organization among the parents at my school. Again, I was struck by his naivety in assuming that the only reason for Matt not getting funds was their lack of visibility in public space. If only people knew about their agenda, he implied, they would rush up to them and thrust notes into their hands. He spoke eloquently about the organization, and his passion for the cause was both contagious and exhilarating. In his world, there were only wild ambitions and no space for failures. I gazed at him in wonder. Oh my God, I thought. He wants to save the world? I was caught completely off guard. Saving the world was supposed to be the agenda of an 8-year-old zooming uh, around with a towel knotted around the neck. Adults were supposed to outgrow these childish whimsies of playing the cat crusader. But here he was, a miraculously untainted grown up, still holding on to the dream we all eventually shared of being a hero and saving the day. But before I could dwell further on the thought, Jitin was back to pushing his agenda, wrangling money out of the parents in my school. I hemmed and hawed for a while, all the time avoiding eye contact. Then I began. I think I could get some teachers from my school to come in and help out. He cut me short. That wouldn't work well. You see, we always have problems with older. He eyed me and made the quick modification. Volunteers. They generally do nothing but give us yarn and find faults with us. Besides, we have cut-off age for volunteers in our organization. It is 25 years. He concluded with a flourish. At the time, Matt was running a recruitment campaign for new volunteers that ran along the lines of adults have screwed up. It is up to us now. Looking back at the campaign now, Jitin shakes his head and sighs. So much drama? I looked down and tried hard not to laugh. He had meant to offend, but it was difficult to take offense at so obvious an act. This felt like a conversation with one of my brass grade 3 kids, the ones habituated to checking the limits and pushing boundaries. I was thoroughly amused. In fact, I remember smiling all the way home. But there was also a feeling of sweet sadness, like the resurfacing of a never quite forgotten childhood love. The feeling lingered all through the week, and finally, what weekend I decided to go to Sneha Children's Home again. I was, of course, not spending my weekend at the street shelter due to purely altruistic considerations. It was also a solution to the dreaded weekends. Weekdays were filled with school and household chores, but the empty weekends. Ouch! No amount of books or TV could soothe the loneliness that gnawed painfully at me. Plus, my presence would piss off Jitin, and that promised to be lots of fun. I was really running low on entertainment options in Kochi. Little did I know that Mad would become more than a stopgap weekend arrangement. It would soon fill up my entire life and change it in ways I never thought possible.